Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today we are doing the deep conversation format. And the topic today is the three ways: the Stoic Way, the Dao De Jing way, and the Design Way. So why have I put these three things together? Well, the secret is that I wanted to talk about the Design Way. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop talking about it. That's the real reason why I said, okay, I have to do something about the Design Way. And I had already committed to Joe that we're going to do something on Stoicism. So I couldn't give that up. And then I had to figure out what to do that would integrate it. Okay. And I think I've come up with something. Firstly, I mean, at the most fundamental level, what I'm hoping that people would get from this is that I'm hoping that you have a foundation either in Stoicism or Dao De Jing. So you know what a way means, way of being means, how it is a metaphysical view of nature of reality and nature of yourself, and how you actually act, how it is built into your action as a natural part of being. And what I'm saying is that, remember that. That's what you have to do with Design Way for it to be effective. We are going through this entire book. There are many, many concepts that we are going to go through. But unless you bring it all down to what does it mean to be human, and what do you need to do? In the same way in which you hold the best of the concept that you have, whether it is Stoicism or whether it is Dao De Jing or any other way. So it is a way of seeing this tight connection between metaphysics and epistemology. So that is the largest thing that we can get from it. Okay, but at a more efficient cost level, this is the final thing that I'm hoping that you will get some sense of it, so it remains as a goalpost for you if you're going through the Design Way book with us. But more specifically, this is an opportunity of talking about how we actually hold Stoicism or Taoism in our lives, or design thinking in your life. Okay. And start to connect, start to relate these things, see what the similarities are, see what the differences are. The format is going to be heavily conversational. The purpose of this deep conversation format is, frankly, for me to learn how to understand other people a little bit better, of understanding where a person is coming from. So all my other meetups are designed for many people interacting so that they get to interact. So many people get to put their 2 cents on the table. So the pace is, chop, chop, chop kind of a pace. This is a far more relaxed pace on one hand. At the same time, the standard remains the same. The standard for both my regular meetups and this meetup is that every 2 minutes, people should feel that those 2 minutes were worth living. That's the standard. That still remains the same standard. We can screw up for 1 minute, okay? So that gives us a full freedom to screw up as much as we want. But we have to get back on, it's my job. You don't have to do anything. It's my job to make sure that every 2 minutes counts. The way I'm going to do here is that people can talk at length, but I'm going to have a conversation. It's not going to be a soliloquy. It will be a conversation with me. And we will go through one by one. I will talk to people. And in the process, I'm going to keep collecting points. And then we're going to look at all the points and see the patterns in them and have a conversation. All right. So you can talk about, again, repeating the general topic is the three ways. And I'm going to take call people in order, in whatever order I think would be interesting. Okay, so it's not going to be exactly in the order in which people type the exclamation mark. But if you want to talk to me about this topic, 3 ways, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. So the topic is 3 ways: the Stoic way, Dao De Jing way, and the design way. You can talk about their connections. You can talk about them individually, whatever you want. Let's have a good conversation. So go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to talk about this topic. All right, so let's start with Leslie. Leslie, go ahead. So first question for you: which of these 3 are you familiar with, most familiar with?
I'm familiar with Stoicism. I participated in quite a few of your meetups and bought the book to kind of guide someone through a year of Stoicism.
Wonderful. So that's the book by Massimo and Greg.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So how long have you been familiar with Stoicism?
I had no familiarity with it until a little over a year ago when you started the series.
Wonderful. So what has Stoicism done for you?
I think it has given me maybe a tool, kind of like when the world is big and chaotic and there's too much to tackle and too much to fix, the principle of the dichotomy of control just allows me to direct my energy and my attention back to what I can control. It's productive. I think it helps guide a person toward productivity and gets a person's mind off of the things that we have absolutely no control of. And obviously our mind goes to those things, but maybe Stoicism helps gently redirect them.
Wonderful. I think dichotomy of control, I'm not that familiar with Stoicism as compared to many people here, but the heart of Stoicism, as best as I know it, it's like 80% is the dichotomy of control. If you get that, I think you get most of what Stoicism has to offer. So let us focus on that because it's such a simple idea. How would you describe dichotomy of control to somebody who doesn't know it?
It's the idea that some things in life are essentially completely within our control and some things are not completely within our control. And the things that are not completely within our control, we might have partial control or we might have no control. And the line between the total control and the not total control is almost, it's the line between our brain and everything else, that we have control over our thoughts and our intentions. And that's about it, that we almost don't quite have control of our emotions. I think our thoughts can shape them, but our emotions will be what they will be. They're a little bit in the realm of partial control, but we have our intentions for what we will do, but we have very little control of how the world responds to it, how other people behave or react, or even whether the universe affords us the opportunity to attempt to bring our intentions to fruition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So what happens when you actually grasp the dichotomy of control? How is your world or life better when you grasp it or when you internalize it?
I think it enables me to take productive steps forward that I wouldn't be able to if I were sort of swamped by thoughts of all the things that aren't good in the world and all the things I can't control. It could be debilitating. And refocusing my attention to things I really can control redirects my thoughts a little bit like meditation. It's not rejecting those thoughts of what I can't control, but it's just releasing them and focusing my thoughts on what I can control and setting objectives that I can control. I cannot control whether I will get a particular job, but I can control whether I intend to sit down this afternoon to write the cover letter.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So it just, oh, sorry, I guess I was just going to summarize it.
Please.
The focus on what I can control shows us the way to the baby steps to move forward in our lives.
Wonderful. I find it tremendously liberating. Let me ask you a couple of, are you familiar with Dao De Jing or the Design Way?
I am not. If you gave a summary of those, I would appreciate it so much.
We'll come to that. So when people start talking about that, we will come to that. So let's go. I mean, we'll have chance to kind of keep coming back on these topics. Now, Joe is really into Stoicism, and he's the reason I did not completely change the meetup into something else about Design Way, and I had to keep the Stoicism part. So Joe, tell me about you and Stoicism.
So I think Leslie was right, spot on, is the idea of the dichotomy of control really is the core of Stoicism. But if you look at it from a different type of a perspective, is that you recognize what is outside your control, and then you also have this period of acceptance. So you're willing to accept what is outside your control. And then you're not tying yourself to outcomes. So an important part about this is that many times I found myself, and I'm sure most people, they have an expectation of some sort. And you demand that you want something. And the moment you do that, you have that expectation that actually you have the ability to be disappointed. But if you realize that outcome is something that you don't control, or even the way a person acts is outside of your control, then that brings you a certain degree of tranquility. And it also allows you to interact with others much more rationally. So, I mean, it gives you the basis of how to function with not only yourself, but with others. And I think that's a really important part that sometimes people overlook. It's not just about yourself, it's how you interact with others. So when I look at, God,
let me ask you, I think the most beautiful and most powerful statement of dichotomy of control is the Serenity Prayer.
Absolutely.
So could you can say it better than I can. So go ahead.
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes.
And
so
actually,
the way I see it is that it's kind of like, imagine you're in the room. Most people are actually going and banging their heads against the wall. And what dichotomy of control is about is to say, where are the doors and where are the walls? What is it that you can control and what is it that you can't control? When I read Stoicism first, the first impression you have is that they will hit you on the head. Like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, will hit you on the head about the things you cannot control. You cannot fully control, like your health. You think you have your health, you can lose it. You think you have friends, you can lose it. If you have family, you can lose it. If you have wealth, you can lose it. You can lose everything. You have reputation, you can lose it. Okay. But the whole purpose of that, to point those things out, is to actually show you something that is yours and that is completely yours. So it gives you this point of focus from which you can do things, which is completely within your control. And it is tremendously liberating, because what it does is that it allows you to fully exercise your will by stopping yourself from trying to exercise will on things where you cannot exercise will. And it says, this is where you can exercise your will. So now go to town. So it is, it's by acceptance of things that you cannot change, you have the courage to change things. And the wisdom is simply about to make the difference. So acceptance comes first, and then, then the courage. Now, I want to relate it to Dao De Jing. So Joe, you've been participating in Dao De Jing meetups. What is the similarity that you see between the Taoist approach to nature, firstly, and the Stoic approach to nature?
I mean, if you're looking at the difference, and I want to come back, and I do want to come back to the Serenity Prayer, because
Please.
that's a really,
Let's do Serenity Prayer first. Go ahead.
yeah, because what this really is interesting in drawing up a model for a business one time. It was a framework. It had a set of principles, it had a set of goals and initiatives, and it had an infrastructure. But within that framework, I had three things that I included.
Mm-hmm.
Things that I could not change, things that I could change, and what new initiatives could be done. So essentially, I took what was the Serenity Prayer and applied it to a model. Now, you can apply the same model to your life. Sometimes you go into a business, you have fixed assets that you cannot change. These things are integral to what you do. Then you have things that you can actually do better. And then you need the wisdom to know which ones to change and which ones not to change in order to flow with the rest of the world. So it actually works in a design
Mm-hmm.
of a framework
Mm-hmm.
of how you actually function. And it actually works in if you have principles that sit on top of that, and then you have goals and initiatives, these all come together into how you actually live your life. So this is like a very important concept, that it's not only something abstract, it's something that you can actually almost, if you have the right information, you can apply logic to it and make actual business decisions. So this is something it plays out in every aspect of our lives. Now, coming back to the idea of the difference between the Taoist perspective and the Stoic perspective.
So one comment I would make is that,
sure,
if you look at the entire of Western philosophy, I think the Stoic approach is the closest, especially the ancient philosophy. We forget about, there are some people in the modern philosophy who have picked up a lot from the Eastern approach, but I think Stoics are very close to the Taoist go ahead.
The difference is logic, right? So Stoicism works to understand the order of nature, and the Taoists look at experiencing the natural order of nature.
Beautiful.
So you're living through nature. So that's the distinguishing characteristic. When you're actually applying logic to it, you're putting names and principles and things to it, that it gives you a framework, as opposed to living through
Excellent point. The thing is that, if you look at it, that is the heart of difference between the East and the West. East is very intuitive. It is very close to nature. I'm talking mostly about Taoism here. And the same kind of ideas are there in India, where you're trying to intuitively be in tune with nature. The place where, and that part, kind of acceptance of nature, is there in Stoicism. So saying that, you accept things you cannot change. That is very much, Taoist. That is, Lao Tzu and Marcus Aurelius would agree completely on that. Now, the place where the difference is, and you put it very beautifully, the West is about transforming nature. It is about using words. It is about using principles. It is about creating, saying, okay, what kind of society should we build given this? So Stoics would naturally do that. And comparatively, Lao Tzu keeps on going back to saying, be like nature. It is intuitively trying to get at the same thing, but Lao Tzu kind of shies away from using words, whereas Stoics are big on using words, using logic to do that. Leslie, you had a point.
Actually, it was a question. I was wondering if either you or Joe could give an example of a thought or a quandary or a situation someone could have, and what the two different approaches would be. Just something
Sure.
specific.
We'll do that. So I'll go ahead and put that as a question. What I want to do is I want to do kind of one-on-one conversations with people so people can fully explicate it. But this one, I will put that as a question, and we will come to all of these at the end, because I want to see where people are coming from first, and then we will deal with questions. Thank you, Leslie. So Joe, what else would you like to say about the three ways?
Well, I think that it's really, there's a really big distinction in the sense that once you start naming things, that's when you start adding principles. So the idea that what is your goal? Your goal is virtue. And in one of the things that had actually come out really in just in a book that I was recently reading about Marcus Aurelius, is that your willingness to, things don't have to be a certain way. And that essentially you're going with the flow of nature. You're being like water. And what I was referring to is that there were people that he knew that were part of his, the sophists, that were actually more interested in being right than they were actually in living virtuously. Now, this is important, and I'll get to the distinction in a minute.
Yeah, but that one is neither Stoic nor Taoist, right? That approach.
No, but the idea of that, if you're seeking virtue, is a Stoic approach.
Absolutely. So I just want to connect one point up from whatever you were saying. See, if you look at it like Taoism, Stoicism, and then the design way, there is a continuum there. So
absolutely.
Stoics are trying to name things, and they do name things up to a point. Design is actually taking that approach,
yes,
and making that the center of saying human being is a being that transforms everything. You're transforming yourself, you're transforming society, you're transforming your environment, you're living by that. So there is a continuum here between Lao Tzu, Stoics, and the design way on this.
There's an absolute continuum between those. And again, I think that the idea that, again, if you're striving for virtue per se, that is your goal, then that will guide you in living with others, which is actually living within, essentially living with nature. That's how the Stoics would look at it, is living in accordance with nature, is living with others. It's a discipline of action. And then you can get into the idea, and at some point we'll probably get to this, is the idea of cosmopolitanism, and how Heraclean circles are a model. And actually you can see them in the design way in certain designs. Wonderful. And if you can, we can actually link that a little bit later. I looked on page 136, I believe it is, or something like that, that some of these models that the Stoics have put together of how you live, not only in accordance with nature, but in accordance with others, and that you have these principles, that there's a design way component that actually fits in nicely with what the Stoics believe and what the design way shows, and what the Taoists believe too. It shouldn't be, they're not too far apart. They really aren't. I just think that the real distinction, if you were to say what is the distinction between the two, I think it's logic. That the Stoics are applying logic to nature. And so then you're looking at the order of nature instead of the natural order itself.
Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Now Maritza has also looked at all these three. So let's go to Maritza. Maritza, what do you see are, what do you see are these three ways, and what are the connections between them?
Well, you brought up the dichotomy of control, and that was the most impactful thing that I've gleaned from Stoicism. It's just, it's so freeing to be told, or to understand that there are a whole bunch of things outside of your control. And I feel like that is something that makes looking at the Tao, looking at the design way easier. Once you internalize this idea that there's always going to be things outside of your control, you start looking at things from a, intrinsically versus extrinsically, and it allows you the freedom to move from perspective to perspective. And that's something that I feel all three schools of thought really do emphasize, this necessity to switch focuses. And so that's what I got most from Stoicism, and that I find that the thread feeds through in all disciplines.
That's very interesting. I want to make sure I understand it, because it's a very profound point. So when you're designing something, right, you're trying to, like when you're creating a design, you're saying, where are the boundaries, where are the limits, and where are the places where you can grow? Because ideally, whenever you're designing something, you're designing for growth. You're trying to create a structure which provides enough. It's kind of like electric circuit. It is providing enough insulation so that your energy is not wasted. At the same time, it is providing enough conductivity to take the energy where it needs to grow. And you use that in order to grow. But in order to have a system like that, you need to know where the limits are and where the flowing part is.
Or at least to understand that. So if you're designing, you have to understand that no matter how diligently you identify those boundaries or set up your assumptions, there's going to be some of them that are still on the outside. And that's very easy to lose sight of. And so especially if we consider that as a designer, you're designing your life. Well, it's even all the more important to understand that there's going to be things outside of your boundaries.
Another way of looking at it is to look at the faculties that we have. The Taoists are focused on the feeling and intuition. They're saying, be in contact. Don't lose the feedback that you're getting from nature, and live according to that. What the Stoics are doing on the top of that is that they are saying, use your reason, figure things out. What the design way does in a very big way is uses the faculty of imagination. So project into the future, see what is possible, and actually start building towards that. So use your feelings, use your thought, and push forward. So I see kind of, that design way in some, basically it is a modern book. So it sits on the top of everything else. I have to also tell you that I was reading Sullivan's chapter, and I cheated. I went to the next chapter, which is the face-to-face chapter. And that is magnificent. That is magnificent, because it actually is at a much higher level of integration than the design way. But it does it in the intuitive way, not as explicitly as the design way does. But it is basically in the same direction, but approaching it in a poetic, metaphorical way. And it's actually speaking to things far more deeper than the design way does. So bringing that together is something that I'm really looking forward to. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Dave. Dave, go ahead.
Well, I think I watched the half-hour video on the design way about a week ago, and I don't recall great things sticking out, but my background as an engineer, I think I've been in the design business, but I will make a statement that I really trust you that the things you bring to market are usually very much worthwhile. So
let me go ahead and explain this, because I was reading Sullivan, and he was talking about the differences between the engineer's way of approaching and the architect's way of approaching. Engineer is a matter of fact person who is trying to see how things actually are put together. And he's trying to design things in the efficient way. it comes off to an architect as being very prosaic, reality-oriented person. An architect comparatively is trying to imagine what is possible. And he's trying to look at the future, and he's trying to actually use the power of imagination. So it is basically imagination, whereas the engineer is focused more on thinking. Now, to do good design, what Louis Sullivan says is that you have to be both. You have to be a great engineer and you have to be a great architect. So coming from an engineering background, what happens is that when you see some things, you get a sense, you can appreciate the engineering part of it. And you kind of vaguely appreciate. The good thing is that you can vaguely appreciate what the architect does, but it seems kind of foreign to you. And in some ways, it seems kind of, it's like, to put it at the extreme level, he says, engineers regard architects as dreamers, and architects regards engineer as prosaic person with their nose to the ground, not really seeing the larger picture. But you need both those things to work together. And that's what Louis Sullivan's work is about. That's what this design way is about.
Well, and I would say an engineer is normally utilitarian. If I'm going to design a building, it'll just be a series of boxes, one stacked on top of another, the cheapest way possible, whatever, and to enclose a certain amount of space, and I'm done. But an architect, in a way, is a salesman.
No, that one. So the way in which Louis Sullivan thinks is that you first have to design so that things are effective. You can't do anything beyond that. But then what you have to do is that, just like you have to speak to the efficiency of movement of your body, which is what you're doing when you are designing things from the efficiency perspective, you also have to realize that human beings have emotions. Human beings have kind of social needs and spiritual needs. And what you put together, once you have designed, once you have figured out the efficiency part, you have to give it the emotional meaning. So people, when they are using, let's say, imagine it's a living room, right? Living room, when you design it from an engineering perspective, will have certain things. But then you have to make it feel a certain way, so that people not only find it efficient to live, but they want to be there. They want to have conversations there. They want to actually live there. They want to meet with people there. How does it need to be? How does it need to make people feel to make that happen? That sits on the top of that. So that's how Louis Sullivan or somebody like Harold Nelson thinks about this problem. That's the relationship. It's not either or. It's not putting one down and saying the other, but it's and is what it is they're doing.
Well, and I think Louis Sullivan is talking about adding ornamentation. And it may only be 5 or 10% of the building, but it's what will make that building stand out. So the customer will say, I want an office in that building. And that's why we're saying that the architect is a salesman.
No, it is more than that. It is certainly true. That is certainly true. But more than that, the customer should feel, I want to be here.
Yeah.
This building inspires me. Being in this building makes the quality of my life better. It is a very profound kind of interaction. It is not a sales in the sense that, in a sense, it is sales, but that's a very small consequence. What you have to do is that you have to speak to the emotional nature, spiritual nature of a person and make them feel that all the time. If you do that, then it's good architecture.
Well, and the client wants his customers to think, oh, the man I'm going to see is up in the 4th floor of that new building. He must be somebody important, and I'm going to take my business to him. So yeah, it's, as you say, it's emotion and all this thing tie into it more than just space. There
are multiple kinds of emotions, and people like Louis Sullivan make a very dramatic difference A building which is trying to impress other people is a very different kind of a building. It is a building which is a phony, which will sell you something just in order to make the sale. That's not the kind of thing that Louis Sullivan is talking about. Louis Sullivan is talking about something where the product is actually transforming the people. A person should feel that when you walk in that, it is like a command to rise up, to be a better person. That's what the building needs to do. That is good architecture. That vision is dramatically different from everything that you're talking about. This is a much higher level of integration of reason, concretes, imagination, emotions. And that's what Louis Sullivan is about, which is very different from the typical thing. So what you're talking about is how most architects operate, most salespeople operate. That's not what we are talking about. That's not what the design way is about. That's not what Sullivan is about. But he's talking about something far more foundational. Wonderful. Next, go ahead, Dave, you had another point?
Well, I was going to say one other thing. I know Joe talked very well about Stoicism, and he and I both attend the Orlando group, and he's leading me through that a little bit. But that and Dao De Jing, to me, I just saw a parallel that both emphasize the simple life as opposed to ostentatious or luxury or trying to impress people. I see that in both philosophies that, don't try to toot your own horn, just live life simply, and that way you'll be happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, on that front, there is difference. I mean, the honesty, authenticness is there throughout. So that is one quality of authenticness, okay? That is there throughout. Now, the way in which people apply it, all these three are very different from each other. The way in which Taoists approach it is simply go back to nature. I mean, at the extreme of it, they would actually leave the city and go into the mountains. That's what their solution was, okay? Many of the Taoists. Stoics are much higher than that. What they are saying is that you have to learn to be authentic in midst of a city. We are social animals. You have to learn how to operate. You have to come up with principles to do that in the midst of the city. And what the design way is doing is that it is taking that further and saying, how do you build that into everything that you put together? Everything that you make, how do you make it have that quality? How do you operate in the midst of a city? It's not a simple life. It is a very complex life, but authentic. How do you achieve authenticity in the complexity? So that's what they are trying to do. So there is a gradation of that in that.
Yeah, and the one other thing I would say, I think a lot of us have the impression that Stoicism means withdrawal. I'm sitting there with my arms crossed, I'm separated from the world, I'm not being involved. But what I've learned about Stoicism is no, we go into the world, but to me, it's so much about attitude. I'm trying not to let the outside world affect me. I'm not trying to have an overreaction, jumping to anger or yelling at people, whatever. As Joe had said, it's what I can control versus what I can't control. But yeah, a lot of great things going on. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I will add to that. I mean, you're absolutely right that, it's not about withdrawal. It's absolutely not about withdrawal. But the brilliant point that they have is to understand how to be individual and participate at the community at the same time. And it is by looking when the dichotomy of control is all about that. It is all about saying, what is the point that is just mine? What is the heart of that? Being able to identify that so you can go to it in the midst of war. These people were emperors, some of them were emperors, some of them were slaves, some of them were generals. And they're talking about doing this in the midst of that. And it does require, kind of very clear separation, but it is community and individual. Thank you, Dave. Great points. Next up, folks, if you would like to talk about your observations on these 3 ways, you can talk about either one of them, or you can talk about 2 of them, or you can connect all of them, whatever you would like. Go ahead and type exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. Next up is Joya. Joya, which of these are you familiar with?
In a sense, none of them.
Okay.
And in a sense, maybe all of them. But I wanted to even just pick up on Louis Sullivan, because I've not heard of the Design Way since you mentioned it, and I started watching the YouTube videos you were posting. But we have been doing this deep dive into Louis Sullivan, who I think the Design Way captures what his approach is.
Let me introduce you, Joya. So, folks, we have been really going deep on Louis Sullivan, okay? And Louis Sullivan is my absolute favorite thinker. It is profound. And then, Joya, Maritza, my friends Rupali, Rob, and Sherry, we talk about Louis Sullivan, and it's the most rewarding meetups, most fun meetups for me. I'm trying to make Design Way better than that, but it's going to be very, very hard, because Louis Sullivan is so incredible. And so, Joya, so I just wanted to give that perspective. So Joya has been doing, I think we have done about 20 plus meetups, going through 2 of his books. We are on the second book. Go ahead, Joya.
Louis Sullivan is absolutely incredible. And I agree too. He's become probably my favorite thinker. Absolutely. And just even more so now. So, and encourage everybody to join us tomorrow, 2:30 p.m. if you can, for the Louis discussion meetup. But I wanted to bring in one of his ideas that I think connects all of these 3 concepts, which is his idea of power. And so it starts with the power of nature, which I think the Taoists get beautifully and perfectly, that nature is this process and there is this power of growth, this power of life. And then you have to have this power of feeling, intuition. Louis Sullivan calls it instinct, but that's really what he's getting at, that first power of intuition that connects with the power of nature. And I see that connection with Taoism. Then with Stoicism, we get to the powers of man, the powers of human beings. And it is first that power of your mind, what we've already been talking about, the power of what you can and cannot control. One of the things I've gotten from Stoicism is how you develop virtues. And those virtues themselves are powers that you then now bring into the world. And then I see that the Design Way builds on top of all of this. You made this point, I think, and I think it's true that this is the most modern, like the other 2 are ancient, and this is the next evolution. This is when we bring all of them together and take it the next step forward. And I think that's what Louis Sullivan sees here too, that we take all of this together, we take the power of nature, our powers of, he talks about, instinct or intuition, he talks about intellect, and then we need imagination. And that's when we take these powers and then transform the world, which he does through architecture. And then we transform society. So his word for that is democracy, but it's really this idea of the free society. When you have all of these designers that come together and design a community together, there's that level of design as well. Like Joe was talking about cosmopolitanism. I think that is the ideal that we get to there. So I just want to bring in that idea from Louis Sullivan for our discussion.
Wonderful. I would love to pick up on these threads, because the core of Louis Sullivan's idea is form follows function. So you try to understand what the functions are, and the functions actually create their own forms. So in some ways, it's a very powerful way of going back and forth between forms and functions, because when you see a form which doesn't make sense to you, many times the functions operating there are different than what are supposed functions. So they're all, so it's a very profound way of looking at design, by looking at what is it that people are trying to do. What is the goal? And he also talks about nature of human beings, of saying that either you fundamentally think that freedom and love is good, this kind of expansive view of human beings and others, where there is a lot of benevolence between people, or you have fear of people and fear of everything, and you're holding on to that. So you're going like this. And the structures that you see in design are either this way or that. So they may have the same names, but some of them are structures that allow for growth, and some of them are structures that are designed to stop growth. So it's a very, very profound point. Excellent. So who would like to comment next? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Marco.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe like a balance is like the vein that sort of like I know in sort of like in the Taoist, like there's the it's sort of the balance of extremes, basically, like, and then you have in Stoicism, there's, you need a balance there, like there's things you can control, and when you can't control something, you need balance. And like as far as like the design way, like you have like parameters that you're there's things you can and can't do, and you're sort of like trying to find the balance between that. Something like that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marco. I actually, when you look at, for example, I Ching and compare it to Dao De Jing, there is a very big difference that you see. This concept of balance is central to I Ching, but Dao De Jing actually approaches this issue in a different way. What it holds is that these two things, which are contraries, are not contradictories. So the way, and Yasuhiko put it very beautifully, it's like breathing in and breathing out. When you breathe in, you have to breathe out. When you breathe out, you have to breathe in. So these are kind of natural things. So they seem to be opposite direction, but they need each other. So reason and emotion. And it's a way, good breathing is a combination of good breathing out and good breathing in. Not so much a balance, but finding a way of breathing. So that's how kind of Taoist, like Lao Tzu approaches it, of saying, what is nature? How does it naturally flow? Let me act according to that line along which nature goes, which is the De. Again, Dao De Jing. Jing is a book. So it is actually putting it, naming all of these things. Dao is about the way of nature, and the is your pursuit of it. So Dao, may I see like nature and the sage, or nature or a person, as being an axis which is perpendicular to this yin yang axis. And what you're trying to do is that you're trying to say, what is the way of nature? How do these things naturally integrate with one another? How do they go back and forth between one another? And let me understand that way and follow that way. And that axis is perpendicular to the yin and yang axis, or the balance axis. So that's how I see Dao De Jing. All right, who would like to go next? Any observations, either about Stoicism or Dao De Jing, or the design way, or the integrations between them? Everything, all of them are fair game. If nobody has anything, I'm going to ask Joe, because Joe had a whole bunch of points to talk about. So
I want to go, Shrikant.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, they'll do the nature and Dao De Jing. Nature obviously doesn't have control. I mean, it needs controls in order to grow and do things, but there is that, you do have to just follow it, go as it goes. And when I read that Dao De Jing, I always get this sense that I'm being, taken inward, outward, and outward it goes very big, but it also gets brought back So it can come inward again and go out. And I think that that's what the most beautiful part. But it's also, the language is simple. As a
Let me comment on this point, Laura. That's a really fascinating point. Okay, this idea of inner and outer and going between them and the beauty that is created by them is crucial to design. Like Louis Sullivan is all about that, of saying, how do you, I mean, he asks a very interesting question. I mean, it's only Louis Sullivan, he has such beautiful poetic. He says, why did man want to create? Was it not because he was lonely? So you are creating something that captures your inner life, and it speaks to you at a spiritual level, at an emotional level, at an imaginative level, and it makes you more of a human by externalizing the grandeur which is inside. And that's what design is at its highest, of this going between in and out. And there is that, you're absolutely right, that it is, that part is there in Lao Tzu. So when you look at, let's say, people doing Tai Chi, you can actually see it, that the harmony which is there inside is being expressed by the harmony of physical movements outside. And that harmony of the external feeds back into the inner harmony, not only for that person, but for others who are experiencing that. So this going back and forth between inner and outer is a profound point. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, well, that's also form and function the whole time. It's iterative form and function. And, you know, from the perspective of, I just had a thought.
Let me comment on
okay,
that. That's a great, go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, I was thinking about the Stoic, you know, because the Stoic would say, okay, it goes like this, you know, it's inside, it goes outside, just sort of like this approach is this way, we do it that way, and I'm a Stoic and I take things like that, and I like to think in terms of design all the time, but with a creative spirit, of course. Anyway, now, so that's my view. And I just, you know, the Italians have an expression, speak like you eat, which is supposed to mean you're supposed to, you know, speak clearly, which they don't do, and they don't write clearly. You know, you have to read, you just have to start the newspaper article at the bottom of the article to understand what it's about. But Tai Ching doesn't do that. And that's the beauty. I think the beauty of Louis Sullivan is he says everything with such simple elegance that anybody can read this and appreciate it. You know, you don't have to run to the dictionary every time to find out what the word meant. So, no, it's important. I mean, you know, that means it's written for the mass, you know, not for the elite. And that makes something so much more important in my eye, you know, because
Thank you.
of that. Okay.
Thank you, Laura.
I'm done. What do I give? Any time up to anybody else?
Thank you. So I want to comment on two things that Laura said. One is that she actually said lots of interesting things here. Okay, so I want to comment about two things. One is form and function. She said, "Oh, that's just form and function." That's a very profound point. Okay, function is basically your function of life. Is your kind of your spirit acting through all your faculties. Form is what we design. So the form has to follow the function. It has to represent all of the grandeur which is inside us, that is a moving, living thing. It has to capture that in concrete and in steel, in wood, in words that we write that are out there. It has to do justice to that. So that's one part of causation. The second part of causation is that when you actually do that, that speaks not only to you, but to everybody else. And that, because think about it, it's like what is going on inside my head is really not accessible to you, and vice versa. It is only by design. These words that I'm speaking are designed, as poor as they are designed, but they are causing something in your consciousness, which I have no access to. So design is the intermediary that is going between consciousnesses of people. And that is what inspires people. That is what makes people think. That increases our grasp of reality. It increases our enthusiasm for living. So that's what design does at its best. So that was one point. The second point is about Stoicism. Like the Stoics, they are very clear about establishing what is within your control and what is not within your control. And that's a very fundamental point. The next step, though, the modern world is built on something more than that. It is about seeing the future possibilities and achieving future intentions in spite of all the unpredictability of the world. So the subtitle of the Design Way, I'm not quoting it exactly, but it is intentional. It is your intentional, achieving an intentional purpose in an unpredictable world. So you accept the fact that the world is unpredictable. At the same time, you realize that you are a living being and that there is a direction in which you are trying to go. And yes, you're going to make mistakes. That is part of life, but you still do that. So this future orientation and a systematic way of going towards that is something that is very much modern, which the Design Way has. Lots of people have, like Bayes' rule is all about that. Scientific method is all about that. OODA loop is all about that. So it sits on the top of the acceptance part, but then it uses imagination to transform. The extent to which we can transform the world was not apparent to people before the Industrial Revolution. The scale at which transformation is possible was not, people knew that they could transform things, but the scale was not possible. So things after that have that characteristic, which is what Design Way has. So it brings in a whole bunch of issues that neither Dao De Jing nor the Stoicism deals with. Next up is going to be Mark. Mark, glad to see you here. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, sorry I haven't been for a while. So I haven't attended many of your reviews of these approaches, but I do have some familiarity with Taoism and Stoicism, but not really anything with the Design Way and only a little Louis Sullivan. So I wanted to preface with that. But
Sure.
I agree with a lot of what's been said so far, but one thing I wanted to bring up, my view of like Taoism and Stoicism is they have a lot of similarities that we've commented upon. But to me, Taoism, the focus is about being. Stoicism starts with being, but does move then into doing, which is why I think of them as being connected, and I like both. But what I think about the modern ideas.
Can I comment on that?
Okay.
It's a profound observation. In some ways, you can see that, like the way I see, I'm from India. It's all focused on being, just experiencing yourself, being aware of your consciousness. So it's all about being. That occupies most of the energy. West, on the other hand, is all about becoming. It is all about transforming things. So there is also the kind of being and becoming difference. And there's also inner and outer. The East is far more focused on the inner and trying to, be that. And I think the West is much more focused on the outside and transforming that. Go ahead. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
Yes. So just to build on that, I think one of the great benefits I got out of this when I studied this was you get this idea about deciding what to do, what's important to you, as well as like what you can and can't change. But there's 10 things you could change, but what should you change? That's the big trick in my mind. You can't do it all. So, and I took away a huge amount of stress relief. What I would call, my mind became a lot quieter because I could let go of a lot of these nonsense expectations. That one, you can't actually make them happen. Two, I felt I shouldn't really have them anyway. So it was a process of discarding stuff that was in my way. But I wasn't doing it with this great role of transforming or doing something special. It was just like, I'm trying to do too much. I'm overwhelmed. This was a great way to get to that quiet mind, as I call it, which was really good. I don't know whether Louis Sullivan or the Design Way addresses this, but I have done a little reading of Louis Sullivan and Western.
Let me comment on that. It's amazing. What I'm doing here in this format, Mark, is that I'm going back and forth because every time you say something great, I want to put a frame around it. I want to put a little notice saying, look what he's saying. Okay. You know, it is a profound point. I think most of our growth is letting go of things. It's kind of removing things because we live both in our kind of surroundings as well as inside our head with a lot of stuff that is actually impeding you from living. That maybe was useful to somebody at some point or even to you at some point, but it's being carried over. So you have tremendous amount of inertia. And what you do is that when you start dropping all of those things, suddenly frees up the energy, the time, everything, the space to build something in its place that really matters to you. So a lot of it is about unlearning rather than, you know, it's about subtracting rather than adding. Go ahead.
So I'm a product of the West, and I agree with your analysis of like, I don't know whether it's growing, but we're not happy with the way things are. The Western mind is always, you've got to be dissatisfied. You can't be content. You can't just be. And that means you've got to take on more and more stuff, which to me is actually a hindrance to whatever you're trying to achieve. And I don't hold with this. I have to keep achieving something. That's why I have a lot of issues, and you've heard me push back on this with some of these books and approaches.
Sure.
I feel that should coming on with the Western books.
Right. Let me comment on that. That's a profound point. I mean, I think West is focused on the outside and is about transforming the outside. East is focused on the inside and trying to kind of intuitively grasp it, be actually open. It's like being open to experience of what is going on inside you. And the whole set of meetups I'm doing is all about trying to bring these two things together. Okay, like Louis Sullivan is all about that. The reason I'm doing the meetups with Dao De Jing is that is the most powerful way of saying, what does being look like? Okay, I think Lao Tzu does such a fantastic job of capturing that. But what Louis Sullivan or the Design Way do, and that's why I'm particularly focused on them, is that they actually do this integration. So there are intermediate terms. So for example, in case of Louis Sullivan, he's influenced by transcendentalists who are basically influenced by Indian thinking. So there is a very big, he's also kind of, there is a lot of influence of life. Like he is very much into being in touch with nature and understanding how things naturally grow. That biological being, most of the West is built on the material. It's like a billiard ball model of Newton, of saying, what do I need to throw at what in order to achieve what goal right now? Okay, but even in medicine, it is like that. Okay, it's saying, here are my symptoms. Can you throw something at me that will make those symptoms go away? You're not looking at the living being as a whole, what health is, how it is put together, and what is the actual problem, what is the cause of the problem, and how can you fix it? So yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Go ahead.
I don't disagree with anything you just said. I would just add, I think Taoism is a great basis for this. Though, as you know, I'm more Buddhist than I am Taoist, because I think it took a lot. They were feeding off each other, but I think Buddhism did do more of what you're talking about. It looked at the how to live with other people, not just with your inner world. And Stoicism, though it made a few mistakes about the nature of what nature was an attempt to do the same thing. So I see a strong connection between Stoicism and Buddhism as well. And I think for me personally, so far, that's the best recipe I've come up with. When I look at a lot of the modern books, I see it again, it's too much like, it's like you're doing this to achieve success. Like it's always about achieving. And then which to me means, okay, you should do this. You should want more. You should be dissatisfied. You should buy stuff. You should get to be CEO of a company. I'm exaggerating, but not maybe too much. I dabbled in Louis Sullivan and I could be totally wrong. But the bit I read about was like, I like what I'm reading, but if I didn't have that basis of Taoism and Stoicism, I might start setting unrealistic expectations for myself. Like, am I going to be this great architect? I should be this great architect. I don't have the skills to be this great architect. And I was wondering whether that's just I didn't read the right part of Louis Sullivan, or whether you think that's why you connect them all together, because you do see it, that you do need the foundation first.
Yeah.
And now I'm done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Mark, Louis Sullivan has been, he's my favorite thinker, and he is very inaccessible to many people. And it's very difficult to get at what he's saying, primarily because he's breaking a lot of new ground and he operates in a metaphorical, poetic way. So if you don't get that, then it is very hard. So that's why I've been, one of my favorite series of meetups is the Louis Sullivan series, where we have like 5 or 6 different people talking, giving their takes on it. And I think we are doing a good job of communicating the core of his ideas. The core of the idea is the kind of the form follows function. And it is very much a scaled things. The shoulds that you're talking about are mostly ones that are borrowed from the society and just kind of mindlessly approved, mindlessly accepted. They say, okay, other people say that that's what I should be doing, so that is my should. So it's kind of borrowed at a very deep level. And Louis Sullivan has a very fundamental critique of that. He calls it, feudalism versus democracy. He says most of the thought is feudal, and which is profoundly antithetical to what we are as individuals, and that has dominated most of it. So, but that's a very, very large point. Thank you, Mark, and it's wonderful.
Sounds like I have some more reading to do of Louis Sullivan then.
Absolutely, and I would love to have you talk more about Buddhism, because what I'm doing is that with Dao De Jing, we have the Chinese angle. We have introducing kind of Taoism, that core Chinese thought. We need to get Indian thought in the conversation. I'm planning to do something on Bhagavad Gita, but Buddhism is not a bad idea, because Buddhism is it's like a simplified version of Hinduism, removing all the rituals, because all religions get all inundated. As you were saying, there is a lot of stuff that piles up in your head. The same thing happens with culture, and same thing happened with Hinduism. So Buddhism in some ways was to kind of go back to the core principles that the Indian philosophy had identified, and going back to the roots. So it is very powerful. And maybe we can do something directly on Buddhism, because that may be an easier way to access it than Bhagavad Gita. What do you think?
Well, I don't know how I could talk about Taoism without Buddhism creeping in, and vice versa, to be honest. So okay. I bet you're doing it already, to be honest.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. All right. Next up is Maritza, Leslie, and Joe. Maritza.
So I initially raised my hand. So kind of, because you used the word of the day, and that makes me suspect that you secretly can be in all places at the same time. We did, we just finished a flow meeting. So yes, I'm bringing one more component. And I actually was talking about the design way in our flow discussion, because we were talking about the flow in thought. And I told people that I was going to beat them over the head for the next 2 hours with the word intentionality. And I did, but they liked it. The thing is that you know, and I just heard you say it here, and it occurred to me that that is also a linchpin for all three of these philosophies. You know, when we're considering, or even all four of them, if you add in Louis Sullivan, you know, all of these are forward paths that have to be intentionally pursued by the individual or by the community. And it's a status where, you know, we are ever looking to find that balance between order and chaos, and you can use different tools to get there and to find yourself on the forward moving path. But it has to be something that we approach with intentionality. So that's kind of maybe a small little thread that I'm seeing going for all of these.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, one of the ways is to kind of look at, I like putting these three things together. You know, I came up with this idea just to keep the Stoic theme and talk about Design Way at the same time. And then I realized that if I put one more in there, it's very useful to do these comparisons, because you understand more about each of them by doing the comparison. So let's just use the concept of design from Design Way and try to go back and seeing how Stoics would look at design and how Lao Tzu looks at design. Design is external. You're trying to make something external that is outside of you, and it is actually something that not only you use, but other people use. Okay, it is something outside. Now, the way in which Lao Tzu uses it is actually, he is designing things. He's saying, what is the way which is the least effort way? Understand the people, understand where they're going, and come up with something that naturally follows that path. So he's, in terms of actual body movement of how do you deal with people, he's always designing. Okay, and he's using this principle of Wu Wei as a way of designing, of action without action. So it's minimal action in the sense that he's against fierce actions. He's against pushing things against their nature, but working with nature. So that's how he looks at it. Stoics, now that's very interesting. Okay, they are very much thinking of design of society. So they have, if you want to put Stoic virtues, this is my presentation on Stoicism. There are 4 virtues. I actually have replaced one of the virtues in my this is my understanding of Stoicism. Okay, I think there are 2 internal things and there are 2 external things in Stoicism. 2 which are primarily focused on inside and 2 which are primarily focused on the outside. Okay, and it always starts with the inside in Stoicism, with the dichotomy of control. It starts with acceptance. So it's acceptance and courage. So you have to accept things that you can't change, and you have to have courage. That's what is going to get you going. Okay, that's what you're focused on. Outside, there are 2 things. One is prudence, the rationality that you have to use in your own thinking and in dealings with people. And the other one is justice. Okay, you're trying to achieve justice prudently in the community while focusing on your own dichotomy of control. So that's how they look at it. So their concept of design is the concept of justice, and the way they are working on it, the method they're using is prudence. So that's what they have. Okay, now Design Way has a far more magnificent palette. Both Louis Sullivan or Harold Nelson, they are modern people. So they have, what palette do they have? They're saying they're very much, both of them are about acceptance, okay, of kind of taking, what Harold Nelson calls real. You have to take in the real. The second, he says, it has to be true in the sense that this is bringing in, this is the progeny of the prudence and logic of the Stoics. Okay, you have to check against everything, make sure it is true. So that is epistemology. So first is metaphysics, second is epistemology. The real linchpin, which neither Lao Tzu focuses on or no, I mean, they have kind of a sense of it, but not at all explicit, not at all prominent. Same thing with Stoics, they are not at all prominent, is imagination as being a crucial transforming faculty. Imagination as transforming it. Go ahead, Marisa.
So, okay, I know I just finished this meeting, so I'm bringing it up again. The flow in thought was this topic, right? And so imagination is key. And it was pointed out to us that many of us don't even develop the skill to daydream. But I would like to mention that the specific aspect of desiderata in Design Way is really intriguing to me when you think about these three disciplines, you know, Stoics.
For those people who do not know that word, can you tell people what it means?
Yes, very simply, it means desired things. So those things which one desires, and that's crucial and vital to all three disciplines, because I mean, if we're going to be seeking that meaningful path, well, you obviously want to be aware of which are your desired things. And they should be, you know, internal, obviously, because the externals could be more superficiality. I love what Mark was mentioning about, you know, when we get into the shoulds, we should possibly be checking ourselves. And I feel like if we focus on the desired things, that's a good way for us to avoid falling into the shoulds, as it were. So,
absolutely. The other thing I wanted to stress is that I strongly believe in understanding the context of the people whose ideas we are looking at, okay? And in this context, you have to realize that Howard Nelson is living with a lot of design things. See, culture is design, okay? So the number of design things that we have today of cities, of electricity, of skyscrapers, of, you know, just like all these systems are created. These are designs. So he's talking about design with maybe something like 1 million times richer examples of design all around him. Louis Sullivan is writing in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, of really taking hold of the world being transformed for the first time, late 19th century. So he's seeing it happening. So he's at the verge of world going from a non-industrial world to an industrial world. So of tremendous amount of change taking place. Stoics, they're, you know, most of these people are in Roman times. In Roman times, also a lot of things are happening. Comparatively, China is, you know, 5th century China has less things going on as Rome. And of course, the Louis Sullivan has more things going on. And this guy, Harold Nelson, has even more things going on. So there is difference of just the material things from which you can abstract ideas like design, imagination. What do good designs and bad designs do for you? So you can have a conversation about that, sitting on the top of this amount of things that have been created by people. So you have to remember the kind of the perceptual context, the historical context in which these folks are operating. Wonderful. Thank you, Marisa. Next up is going to be Kevin. Did you have something? Okay, I'm going to unmute you. Mute you. Okay. Next up is Leslie, followed by Joe. Folks, if anybody wants to talk, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Okay, Leslie.
Yeah, I had a thought. It was quite a few minutes ago, but it was the discussion of design and designing in the context of a chaotic, unpredictable world. And it sounded a lot like one of the concepts from Stoicism to predict the things that can go wrong. I think substantially the purpose of that in Stoicism is so those things won't emotionally derail us because we've anticipated them. And I don't know if there's a piece of Stoicism that also says, in addition to being emotionally prepared, maybe try to mitigate. But I don't know, does anyone recall where in Stoicism that is? I thought it was an interesting parallel between Stoicism and design.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, there is a very, it's a standard Stoic practice. If anybody knows about it, go ahead and type exclamation mark. It is to imagine all the possible things that can go wrong, where you're mentally prepared for it. Go ahead.
Premeditatio malorum.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. But I also want to say the difference between that, like something like the Bayes rule, which comes much later, which is modern, is far more sophisticated. It is to say, not just imagine the worst possible, but make your prediction, test it rigorously, have a way of updating your beliefs and operate on that. So it's a far more sophisticated way of proceeding intentionally in the face of the unpredictable world. So, the modern times, we have advanced quite a bit on that. Next up is going to be Joe.
I'm going to be honest. I kind of forget what I was even initially.
The great thing about this discussion,
It was
folks,
a while ago.
There is a very easy solution to this. There is an amazing tool, pen and paper. And the great thing is that you put it down, it doesn't run away from your mind just because something amazing new came in. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it actually does, because I start writing down what Mark was saying about being and doing, and then all these other concepts that came into my head right away. But maybe it would be an interesting exercise to say, okay, if in Stoicism, what is the form? Right? What are the forms? And it was interesting how you explained them. The forms in the central are the principles that you're talking about, like, what are the four creed principles, right? And that's how they're, would you call them forms?
Look, there are many meanings of forms which are very different and contradictory with each other. So form as dealt with by Aristotle is very different than form of Louis Sullivan. So I don't know which one you're talking about.
So I'm thinking about principles in the sense of the within Stoicism.
So then let's not use the word forms, because
Okay.
because actually, because there is so many different meanings, it's very easy to get derailed.
Okay. So one of the things that I would say, though, is just as a model per se, is that Stoicism provides you with this framework that then you're able to make judgments. And that's kind of critical in the design way, because you're also designing a way of actually evaluating the world and not making value judgments specifically. You're making judgments, but you're not adding values to those judgments. So there's the idea of how you experience things. There's also the idea of how what your character is. And I mean, I'm looking at a particular model, the idea of the sublime and the idea of life's experience and how they all come together in one of the models used in the design way. That's kind of how Stoicism kind of works in a sense. It gives you a framework for actually making judgments in everyday life. But I really wanted to link it to the idea of being and doing.
Let's talk for a minute about the concept of judgment, because that's a huge concept. It is deceptively simple,
Right?
Because what it does is that it actually brings together both being reality oriented, thinking through things, having the intuition, projecting a future, and saying this is what should be based on my judgment, and then serving as your guide to action. So it is like bringing all of these things together and then pointing a way forward.
And I will say that there is one aspect of it that it's internal, that you're making these judgments as well. Like, so that all these judgments, you're using principles to guide these decisions, but it's actually you're coming to them internally. So that's, and the other comment I had is that I've thought about the idea of prudence and justice and being externals, but people have also told me that those are considered internal or internals in Stoicism. So, and the reason they used it is it's like kind of an internal decision that you're making, that you're applying your logic in order to achieve a just outcome. So that's one that, but I always had thought of it as an external forces anyway.
There is a I mean, it's a different of perspective. So in one sense, they are internal in the sense that you choose to say, you make a judgment that this is just, and you can make that judgment independent of anybody else. So in that sense, they are independent. They are internal. It's in your control to say that this is just, or to say that this is prudent. On the other hand, justice is by its nature, you are evaluating something external, and you're using that concept in order to be cosmopolitan, in order to kind of interact with the world in a win-win way. That's the best. When the concept of justice that these folks have is different from the concept that we have of justice. Concept of justice, and actually many of these concepts, see, one of the things, I'm a big fan of these great books and the Centopicon, where you can see what has happened to different concepts. So what has happened to the concept beauty? What has happened to the concept justice? Like, for example, concept of beauty has been narrowed dramatically. Like during the Greek times, they thought that everything can be beautiful. And you're seeing that it's a certain way of being. Similarly, just included not just not doing crime. It was a far more expansive concept. So very good.
Yeah, I mean, that was, Mortimer Adler actually defined it the way you did. So it's just, I guess it depends on your orientation on how, and how you're going to define these terms.
Wonderful. Anybody else has anything they would like to add? Any questions, any observations? Otherwise, I'm going to tell, there are lots of people here who are not familiar with the design way. So I'll talk a little bit about design way, but Leslie, go ahead.
Yes, I had I guess a question when you and Joe were discussing the concept of judgments, and I was looking at chapter 9 in our handbook, the Stoics handbook, and that Seneca said that only virtue is good and only vice is bad. I don't know if you wanted to clarify how you were using the word judgment. Judgment sounds like it's assigning good or bad, and that might not be what you meant, but I didn't know if that was an opportunity to clarify your definition relative to Seneca's assessment of good and bad.
Joe, would you like to do that? You don't need to do that. This is not a very detailed examination on Stoicism, but it's up to you.
No, I mean, virtue and vice, and I'm trying to think of the best way, is that, so the only good in Stoicism is something that is always a good. So that's why you have the cardinal virtues. So then the opposite of those would actually be bad. But what is a vice? I had a very good example going.
Sure.
Give me a minute.
Let's step back. So one of the Maritza, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in for a second and introduce one of the core concepts of the design way is actually judgment. It's one of them. And so I wanted to kind of examine a comparison or contrast, as it were, in the judgment of the Stoics and the judgment here that we see in the design way. It's a little less restrictive than how the Stoics would view judgment, because it's specifically saying that judgment, it's reminding us that judgment is not founded on strict rules of reasoning. And that is the most important difference between that and the judgment of the Stoics. The Stoics seem to think that it's based on reasoning. And here in the design way, we're reminded that at our very core, we're emotional creatures. So everything we do has some component of judgment in it. So I think that it's helpful to view how the Stoics describe judgment as a type of judgment, not the judgment. And I hope that makes sense to folks, but that's kind of what helps me in viewing it. And I can only view it that way, having read about the way that the design way describes judgment, because he's very careful to remind us that there is judgment in every action. And when you view it that way, then you have no choice but to presuppose that the judgment described by the Stoics cannot possibly be the only way in which to think of judgment.
Okay, Maritza, I'm going to cheat by reading what you had sent as notes on judgment. So this is notes of Maritza on judgment from the Design Way chapter. Judgment making is essential to design. Design is intentional action that uses critical judgment to transform the ideal into reality. See, this is beautiful. Transform the ideal into reality. Judgment synthesizes creativity and innovation. Judgment is any means that results in an outcome of wise action. Judgment is knowing based on knowledge that is inseparable from the knower. By this, we mean that judgment is based on a type of knowledge that is generated in particularity or uniqueness of the situation. Knowledge that is inseparable from the knower and is only revealed through actions, cognitive or physical actions of the knower. This is in contrast to decisions that are made based on the type of knowledge that is of value primarily because it is separable from the knower. Judgment is not founded on strict rules of reasoning. It is more likely to be dependent on the accumulation of experience, of consequences, of choices made in complex situations. However, judgment is not irrational because it follows its own form of intuitive logic. Design judgment making is the ability to gain subconscious insights that have been abstracted from experiences and reflections informed by situations that are complex, indeterminate, indefinable, and paradoxical. This results in emergence of meaning and value through the creation of relationships and connections that cause the appearance of unities, forms, patterns, and compositions out of apparent chaos. Judgment is, in effect, a process of taking in the whole in order to formulate a new whole. See, this is very, very fascinating, okay? Because what he's saying is that judgment takes in everything. It kind of intuitively takes in everything. Like a wise person has a lot of experience of life. They have a good judgment because they have seen many, many patterns. They may not be able to tell you explicitly that this is the principle on which I am acting, but they know how to apply the totality of their experience to a particular decision, particular action, or a particular. So being able to bring that whole to bear on a new whole that you're trying to create. You're trying to create something new. So judgment is a very, very powerful idea.
But
Joe,
so isn't it, I mean, that's essentially wisdom, what you're just explaining, because it's knowledge, it's knowledge
yes.
applied.
Yes.
That's why that's why as an axiom like they use is wisdom as an axiom, because it's applied knowledge to do
excellent
something.
point. Excellent point. So the closest concept that the Stoics use is wisdom. Yes, go ahead.
Right. So I mean, so then that's essentially what you're doing is you're integrating what you're taking in from the rest of the world in order to apply a better decision. Now, the idea that you can apply this decision based on your ethical framework, which is a virtue ethic ethics, that would be the Stoic approach. But nonetheless, the principle of wisdom still holds true. So that it's still an idea that you're applying knowledge to achieve a better action, a better outcome. So
Right.
that's why that's what is called wisdom, essentially. It's
Right.
a
And no,
definition of it.
that's very good. Yeah, that's very, very good point. It's about wisdom. And it is something that actually, many times it's not explicit. Often it is not explicit. It is bringing to bear the totality of your knowledge onto one particular thing. Next up is going to be Jeff. Jeff, go ahead.
Hey,
Leslie
Shrikant,
wanted to comment.
what a-
I think. Oh, sorry.
what a rich
Yes.
conversation.
Mhm.
Maritza, were you trying to say something there?
No,
Okay,
go ahead,
I wasn't
Jeff.
sure if somebody.
Go
Okay,
ahead, Jeff.
so it's such a rich conversation. It's almost hard to know which place to enter it from. So with sort of within one, there are many rooms here with many open doors, and so in
Go
one room,
go for it. This is it's an open house. So go ahead and meander through any rooms that you want.
well, in one room, I completely agree that design is a very, very rich topic, and worthy of this level of focus and exploration. I think that there are, as you were saying earlier, I think that there are, if you will, first of all, and I'm not sure if this is the best word for it, but sort of dimensions of places where design gets focused. So, for example, design gets focused. I use design to observe myself and my emotions and my thinking and my senses and my interpretations of things and the judgments I make about them and the way I frame how I think about things, because I know that influences what I feel and the decisions that I make and the experiments that I try and even what I choose to learn from them, much less what I actually notice regarding the results. There's all kinds of things that are happening that I don't even notice. The level of things that I don't know, even just inside of me, is so huge. So design is my feeble attempt to see if I can come to grips, first of all, in that internal dimension, in order to discover as authentically as possible what I really do think, what I really do imagine, what I think would be best, how I might frame things and make decisions in order to achieve it. Another dimension where I apply design is in my relationships with others. This whole concept of emotional intelligence and even what's now called conversational intelligence, which is a wonderful book by a woman named Judith Glaser, where she looks at the neuroscience of how we affect each other, that all change and really everything happens not only through the conversation that we have internally with ourselves, but the conversation that we have with each other, and becoming skillful in how we do these conversations inside of ourselves, as well as how we do these conversations with each other in order to, for example, stimulate a little bit of oxytocin to meet the adrenaline and the cortisol that's also there when we feel scared, which is quite often. And so this ability to interact, to connect, to in essence, do what Judith Glaser called getting to we, a sense of belonging. And yes, we are in this life alone, but we're also in it together. If we imagine that any one of us was the only living being on the entire earth, would that life feel like living? We don't know, But if you really want to take it to its farthest extent, imagine that you are the only living thing on the face of the earth. That's a pretty, you could be authentic. There's no reason to impress anybody. You're not trying to influence anyone. You don't need anyone's permission to do anything. You'd be authentic. On the other hand, if you couldn't think or try or do anything without somebody else's approval, would that be a life that felt like it was worth living? Well, not really, So this breathing in and breathing out is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Like, which is more important, breathing in or breathing out? Yeah, answer that one for me, right? So I love that metaphor. That's the best metaphor I've heard this year.
That's thanks to Yasuhiko.
Well, and I thank you for promoting it as well, so that we can all, you're the springboard for him to bring that to all of us. Yes. So I think of our relationships with each other as they're essential. They're part of our meaning of life. They're part of being authentic. Being authentic with whom? Just myself alone in the world, or being authentic with you? It's a big part of what it means to be alive. And so I apply design principles and methods of imagination and envisioning.
Let me apply. Let me talk about how design.
Well, let me just say the very last thing.
Sure.
And so then I individually and we together apply design to, as you said earlier, to transforming our environment. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to try out here? From buildings to climate change, from cars to education. What are we going to try out? And so design applies to myself internally, myself with others in our relationships, and how we consider what it is that we would like to do in order to generate, and form follows function is true in all three dimensions, in order to generate things that not only, as your conversation with Dave was going, things that work, but things that are beautiful, things that are attractive, things that are inspiring and meaningful to us. So I'll stop there. So it's design in these three dimensions. And not only are they individual dimensions, they relate to each other. And then they're also dynamic because it's always changing.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, the great thing about this book, Design Way, is that he has a very powerful way of bringing everything together. So for example, everything that you said, he summarizes in a single concept that actually solves all these problems. All this discussion, just one concept he has. Beautiful concept of service. He says design is a service. That means you're putting something outside, and it is something that is actually the only reason it works is that it produces values to everybody. If you are designing things that is not doing that, then it's not a service. It's not going to work. You're not going to get paid. It's not going to have good effect on your life or anybody else's life. So he has concepts like that. That's just one example. Okay. The other example I want to give is he uses a concept called ultimate percept. This is part of his foundations. These are few concepts, a handful of concepts. What it does is that all these concepts really dramatically redefine the problem. So you think of it in terms of individual and social. So I have to be individual and social. He says, no. You have to do service. This design is service. You are a designing animal, and design is a service. That means it is individual and it is social at the same time, because it has to have all these impacts at the same time. Similarly, he has the idea of ultimate percept. What you're trying to produce with design is ultimate percept. That means it has to be something real. And it has to be ultimate in the sense that it has to capture all the ideal. It has to identify all the relationships that you identified through your thinking. It has to be ultimate in the sense that it has to produce the emotional effect and spiritual effect that you need. And all of it has to be done in reality. So all you're doing is, these ultimate percepts. That's what you're working in terms of. Are you doing that or you're not doing that? So it's very simple. So it brings together, it actually dissolves many of the opposites because he manages to integrate all of these in. Folks, I'm going to give a chance for people who have not spoken before to speak first. So it's going to be Evanique, Laura, Evanique, Jean, Laura, and Leslie. Evanique.
Shrikant, I just want to say thank you. That was very well said.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Evanique.
Yeah, I was just listening to the last part of what you said, and I was thinking of what is the link between the three? And the thing I see about it, and I don't know much about Design Way, and I don't know much about Stoicism, and I don't know much about Tao, but I see the individual and society.
You're in good company. You're in good company, Evanique. I also don't know anything about any of these things. Go ahead.
So when I see it, when I see Stoicism as individual in terms of how you handle yourself and how you handle situations that you can't control, but the only thing you can control is your reaction. And then Stoicism is also about like your fellow human being and having respect for society as a whole, because we're all in this together, whether we like it or not. We're all in this on this earth together. We all have to live here, so we should really respect each other. I think with Dao does go very much on the inside and flow, but Dao also in general talks about how you treat others, and how you earn respect, and how you earn respect not by force, but by, empowering other people. And then Design Way, what you just said, and when he was talking about, your design is from you, it like comes out of you from inside out, but you have to have it for other people. Like it has to be beneficial to other people. And I was also thinking about Louis Sullivan too, is that form follows function. And it's like, it has to be functional for people, right? Like when he's building these buildings, like the form has to be functional for people or it just doesn't work. So I just see, first it comes out of you and you have to culture it, and you have to, learn and, fail and, fail again and, do all these things. But once it comes out of you, the benefit has to be for society as a whole, for your community. I think because if you don't have one of those elements, then really, what is the point? And I think that's the beauty of all these three.
Oh, that's wonderfully put. You're talking about the internal, external. So I start with the favorite quote that I've been repeating in the Louis Sullivan meetups. He begins very early in his life. He says, life was beginning to break in upon him from outside. A continuous breaking in from the outside and breaking out from the inside was to shape his destiny. Okay, this is a very profound point. It is breathing in and breathing out. When you breathe in, you're actually breathing in all of the designs that everybody has produced. You're taking all of them in. But you don't stop there. You breathe out. That means you create designs. You take what you have inside and put it outside. And then you breathe in again. You keep taking in stuff. And everybody is doing that. All of us are doing that. All of us are impacting each other while doing that. We're using words. Words are put out there. What is going on here? Everybody is making all these observations. They are externalizing what is inside of them. And those things which are going, other people are breathing in. They're taking in those things. They're processing those things and putting stuff out. And this is happening on a massive network. This happens with the words. This happens with architecture. This happens with everything that we make. And a good design is a responsible design. You're saying, what I'm saying, is it understandable by people? I mean, the standard is not perfection. You have to do your best. I'm not particularly articulate. Okay, I have all kinds of bad habits about my mind goes through many things and I break a sentence while I'm speaking and keep talking about the next thing that's on mind. But it's about trying your best to externalize what you have inside of you. And that is a service in the sense that your customer, the other person, you have to keep them in mind. Say, is this understandable to each person? The whole idea of deep conversation here is to do this at a deeper level where people can express more of what is there inside and breathe in more of what is there. So it's breathing in and breathing out. Does that make sense, Ebony?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Ebony. Next up is Jean.
Yeah, so I was cooking while listening to I missed something maybe, but anyway, I just want to chime in with what Jeff mentioned, because I think to me, maybe you mentioned I'm very practical. To me, learning and practicing is very critical, maybe because I'm doing architecture. It's not just art. You know, artists, you can do anything you want, but architecture, we do studio, very important part of the study. So basically, we're not just learning theory, we have to use it in the design. I think that's what I really look forward to, is not just because it's theory and practice, there's such a big gap. You know, I think that's the reason I like cooking so much lately, because you get direct feedback. You know, read the recipe lessons and then you make it. You see, oh, it works or not, then you do it again. So do different things. It just, you have quick architecture take longer, especially in American. You know, we could design a city in the time I'm designing a single family here. So it just takes so long. So you don't have, but you still have that cycle of feedbacks, you know, you may not. So I have this theory, you know, when I was doing design, I don't try to achieve perfection in one design. I said, at the level of my knowledge and experience, I will do the best, like 2080 theory. I will do the best I can, but I don't want to spend all my time, because I just, my level is this level. You know, I have to gain the level with the time growing. Doesn't matter how much I spend the time. I cannot reach 100% if I don't reach that level yet. So I think it's more the accumulation. You know, you gain the experience through different projects. You achieve perfection through different projects. You don't achieve.
Can I say something? That's a very profound point. See what happened, and that's core to externalization, because once you put it out there, you yourself can see it and you are able to correct things better. In addition to that, other people can see it. Other people can react to it, and you can take in their feedback, and that feedback, external feedback, as well as your own ability to be cognizant of what you have produced. If it is just inside your head, if you're continuously working, I'm going to get to 100%, I'm going to get to 100%. You can't do that, because it's very easy to get up into all kinds of wrong ideas and go off track. By externalizing it, you're helping yourself to get more feedback from yourself, and you're getting, more importantly, you're getting feedback from others. They bring very different perspective, and they will probably notice something that you have not even thought of. And you are able, but once they have done that, you can incorporate that. And so fantastic, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why I think in Chinese thing I mentioned a few times, you know, we call it 学而时习之，不亦乐乎. They said, your learning and practice, they're endless joy. I think it's very important when we learn a theory, then we will try to apply. I think with this design way, especially, that's why I'm very excited thinking if we can have a subgroup, like people.
No subgroups. It's horrible. It's a horrible idea, Teen. What we have to do is we have to do, if you want to do groups, we have to do a super group. We have to take 52 living ideas and combine it with all the architects. So you have to go in the exactly opposite
It's-
direction to
it's
grow.
not about architecture. I mean, the subgroup, like anybody with different concerns.
No,
like
no, no,
you're
no, no.
concerned about social.
No,
but
no,
then
no.
your group
Subgroups
will
are
solve it.
bad. It's
No, it's perfect. It's like studio.
Anyway,
You
no,
have
no, no.
different studios, then you work on a topic, then we come back together to discuss how your theory and your practice, what the challenge.
This is
That's
the
a better
studio.
way.
Gene, this is the studio. And what happens is that the more people that are integrating with it, you will get much more value from doing that. It is
Yeah.
not about a small
Yeah,
group.
we
It is
still
all
do,
about
we still do what we're doing here, but I propose we also have subgroup to practice it,
Yeah,
solve
it's-
a problem.
sure. It's a terrible idea, but we can talk about it.
You have to be open to it. It's a
I'm open
practicing
to
part is
I'm open
missing.
to all the ideas.
We
Most of my
talk
ideas are
too
also
much,
terrible
but
ideas.
the problem, like we talk, the 1/3 of the idea, if we practice, will be achieved so much. But the problem, we have so much ideas, but we are so bad with practice. How to make it happen? You know, that's the
No,
thing. How do we make it integrate into
No,
life?
no, Gene, that is a fantastic idea. So the way I see it is that I try to apply whatever I'm learning to everything that I'm doing. So
Yeah,
there
but
is
not
like
in a group level.
not
in
in a group
individual
level.
Exactly.
The
Group level is very powerful. That's my point.
okay, the problem is that this Zoom technology is terrible. You know, we can't be working on a table together in Zoom. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
not in Zoom. That's what I mean. Because when I do the landmark,
Okay,
they have subgroup. They work off. Then they share on the Zoom. They don't work on Zoom.
Okay, we'll
Anyway, we can talk
figure it
later.
out. We'll figure it out. Let's not
Yeah.
go off topic. But
The idea is practicing. It's not off topic. It's
no,
about
no.
how we apply the idea.
That is a perfect look. I mean, the practice is critical. Practice is critical. So one thing that we are learning actually here is the practice of speaking, for example, of interacting with each other. Okay, actually, we have gotten so good at it. It is quite scary, actually. It's almost magical that we can just take up something that complex, like the Design Way book, and we can just talk about it. Or we can look at Bible and we can just talk about Dao De Jing, we can just talk about it. It's very, very rare to be able to talk like this on such a wide range of topics. And that practice we have been doing, and that is the practice that is there with everybody. And everybody has gained from it. And no matter what their skill level, everybody has upgraded the skills. And that is huge thing. So I'm a very big fan of kind of just multiple level people and a very large group of people working together, because that is something which is incredibly hard to do. But we are actually doing that. So 20 people having a conversation of this depth is usually very tough. Where we can have a one-on-one exchange like this in the midst of everybody else, that also is very real, very rare, that there is a very deep exchange that is going on, agreement, disagreement, kind of seeing commonalities, seeing patterns, and everybody is actually learning from it. Okay, regardless of what they agree with, that is the magic here. So that's what I'm thinking. Next up is going to, thank you, Jean, great observations. Next up is Laura, followed by Leslie. Laura.
Okay, mine is a silly little thing. You know, when you're talking about sometimes you have too much and you don't like something or whatever. In Italy, there's a thing that they do for things like that. It's not working right, you're not interested, same old thing. You just go to your shoulder and you click it and you say, "E così," and it means that's the way it is. And you get rid of everything. It's broken, you hate the precaution. E così, and you e così through your day, and the world is beautiful. So I offer that to all of you people who might be struggling with anything. Just e così. Okay, that's my way to end your night. Okay.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. Next up is Leslie.
Hi. So my comment actually goes back to what Maritza was saying quite a while ago. But I just wanted to thank Evanique for that what she said. I wrote it down. I'm going to carry it with me. We earn respect, not by force. And I think she said she was quoting Dao, we earn respect not by force, but by empowering other people. And I just wanted you to know, I'm going to carry that with me. I appreciate it. But going back to what Maritza was saying about judgment being part of the design way, and then also what Shrikant read, the design way description of judgment included the word intuition many times. And I was wondering if someone who's more familiar with Dao could just clarify. My instinct is that intuition is probably inherent in Dao. I'm not sure. So
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. The entire Eastern approach to things, and especially the Taoist approach, is very much of an intuitive approach as opposed to explicit thinking. The Tao starts by saying, Tao that can be named is not the real eternal Tao. A name that can be named is not the eternal name. So it is all about saying that be alive to your intuitions. You are getting feedback from the world. Use that.
And this fits perfectly with Shrikant, with what you said earlier, that the design way is kind of the top of the pyramid, and it fits with, it pulls in the intellectual wisdom from the Stoics that Joe was talking about. And it pulls in the nature-based intuition of Tao. That judgment is the combination of wisdom and intuition, and so it really is the coming together. The design way is the coming together. That the top of the pyramid, I think, maybe is how you described it. I just wanted to make that connection.
Sure, thank you, Leslie. I just want to clarify one thing. The profundity of Lao Tzu is at a completely different level than design way. Okay, Lao Tzu gets these core principles of what nature is, what approach to nature should be, far more profoundly than design way does. Stoicism gets the dichotomy of control, which is heart of everything, far better. So there are things in these ancient philosophies, because they came earlier and they looked at it squarely and they got it right. They are profound. So don't underestimate those. Okay, those are very, very important. What the design way does, part of it is that I'm also reading a lot into it. Not reading into it, but what I'm seeing is I'm not really looking at the book. I'm looking at the concept of design that he's talking about, or Louis Sullivan is talking about, or Buckminster Fuller is talking about. That is a profound concept. And that is a profound concept, and it is added to these by the light of the fact that there has been tremendous progress in the West of thinking about the future, of planning, operating intentionally in the unpredictable world. So there is a tremendous development. So it is sitting on the top of all of that. But ultimately what matters is what you get, what concept of design that you get. Like, for example, the way in which Lao Tzu put it is that, can you actually follow the way? That's all matters. It doesn't matter what Lao Tzu said. It doesn't matter what anybody else said. Stoics, do you operate on dichotomy of principle or not? You have to ask yourself that and see what is happening within you. And that's what matters. Similarly, design way as a book is an input. It is a product of culture. It is an external, which is there that you're breathing in. We're trying to breathe in. But what really matters is that, can you breathe out? Can you actually express yourself? Can you improve the way you design? And can you bring to it something of an appreciation of nature, which Lao Tzu has, which is much greater than design way? Can you bring to it of a sense of your own limitations that Stoics have, which is much greater than design way? Can you integrate those things? That's all. That's what matters. That's what practice is all about. The way is all about practice. And it's not about doing this in the meetups It is about doing it in your life all the time. That is the idea of the living ideas, 52 living ideas. These are all ideas. We are trying to live them. That's all that matters. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Mark. Joe.
Actually, I don't even want to build on it from there. I mean, because that was actually so well said that I was just going to come back to the idea that how do we define vice? That Leslie asked a little bit earlier. And I would say that's anything that pulls you away from virtue, right?
Design Way, I just want to say that Design Way has a whole chapter on that of when is design evil or when is design bad? What are the various ways in which it can go wrong? So there is a lot of talk of that along that. Similarly, Lao Tzu talks a lot about vice, of trying to force things and not acting in accordance with nature.
So anything that pulls you away from the principle that you have, so it's pulling you away from nature. So that anything is, so in this case, if the Design Way defines it, and I didn't read that part of the book yet, if it defines it as service, as the purpose for design, anything that would pull you away from service would then be an evil design, correct?
No, instead of doing it deductively, I would say, I mean, if you had to ask yourself, what is vice in design? So I can think of few things. One is that there are unintended consequences of your design that you did not, take into account. That's one thing. The second kind of vice I can think of in design is the vice of hubris. Just because you have, hubris is a separate thing, but there is another intermediate thing where just because it is yours, you do not see feedback on it. Like that means you have the confirmation bias. Just because of the fact that you have designed it, you refuse to see the limitations of it. The next one would be hubris, where you think that your design is immortal in the sense that it is not responsive to everything else that is going on. So it is kind of ignoring nature. It is, Lao Tzu's version is to kind of mistake the name for Tao. So design, whatever you design, is always can be improved. It's a temporary thing. Next up is going to be Mark.
I think Joe may have actually said some of what I was going to say, because you could correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, because you're the expert on Stoicism. But my understanding was that vice was really defined in terms of virtue. Virtues were identified and recognized. There were no specific vices. It was, as you said, something that acts to oppose or hinder obtaining virtue. So I agree with that. Was my understanding of it. But where the more modern interpretation that I've heard people talk about it is like actions against the purpose. It's like anything that will undermine your purpose can be viewed as a vice. I tend to always apply intention to it. If there's no intention, it's not a vice, it's an accident that may be an obstacle to you. To me, a vice, that there's always like an intention behind it, but that's my personal prejudice. I don't know whether that's everybody's definition. But what I wanted to ask you, this word intuition, people throw it around a lot, but I think it means different things to different people. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm often frustrated with people's use of this word. Like, to me, either there's only one definition of intuition and you have to explain how that's beneficial, or there's actually types